My boyfriend sabotaged my job for years. He didn't know I was his new boss. The email notification chimed at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything. I was hunched over my laptop in the break room at Morrison & Associates, stress eating a sad desk salad while reviewing client feedback forms, when I saw it. The subject line made my stomach drop. Hartley Industries presentation, concerns raised. Dear Sarah, we've received some troubling feedback regarding inconsistencies in your recent pitch. Please see attached notes from our preliminary meeting. We'll need to discuss this further before moving forward. Jennifer Walsh, Hartley Industries *. My hands trembled as I opened the attachment. There, in neat bullet points, were concerns about my presentation from last week, the one I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, the one that should have landed us a $200,000 annual contract. According to the notes, someone had reached out to Jennifer after my presentation to point out potential issues with my proposed timeline and budget allocations. Issues that didn't exist. Someone had deliberately fed the client false information about my work. Someone who knew the details of my pitch well enough to craft convincing lies. I scrolled through my phone to the text I'd sent my boyfriend Marcus 3 nights ago. Nailed the Hartley presentation today. Think we might actually land this one. Celebrating with wine when I get home. Red heart *. His response had been enthusiastic. That's amazing, babe. Knew you'd kill it. Can't wait to hear all about it *. But Marcus worked at Brennan Creative, our biggest competitor. The same company that, according to Jennifer's email, had somehow managed to schedule a follow-up meeting with Hartley Industries for this Thursday. The coincidence made my throat tight. I pulled up Marcus's LinkedIn profile, something I rarely did since we'd been together for 3 years, and I thought I knew everything about his work. There it was, his latest post from this morning. Excited to present some innovative solutions to a potential new client this week. Sometimes the best opportunities come when you least expect them. #marketing, #new business, #Brennan Creative *. Posted 6 hours after Jennifer's email landed in my inbox. My salad suddenly tasted like cardboard. I pushed it away and walked back to my desk, mind racing. This had to be a coincidence. Marcus wouldn't deliberately sabotage my career. We lived together. We talked about getting married. He knew how important this contract was to me. But as I sat there, staring at my computer screen, other memories started surfacing. The Thompson Industries pitch from 6 months ago that mysteriously fell through after someone raised questions about my experience level. The consolidated media contract that went to Brennan Creative instead of us, despite our lower bid. The way Marcus always seemed particularly interested when I talked about upcoming presentations, asking detailed questions about timelines and client concerns. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the small notebook where I tracked my project wins and losses. The pattern was there, clear as day once I started looking for it. Every major loss in the past year had happened after I discussed the project details with Marcus. Every single one. And 3 of those lost clients had ended up signing with Brennan Creative instead. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. *, how's your day going, beautiful? Still riding high from that presentation win? *. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. *, actually, there might be some complications with Hartley. I'll tell you more tonight. *. His response came back almost immediately. Oh no. What kind of complications? *. The speed of his reply, the eager tone, suddenly it all felt different. Like he was fishing for information rather than offering comfort. I was about to find out just how right I was. I couldn't focus on anything for the rest of the day. Every email notification made me jump. Every colleague who walked past my desk felt like a potential threat. By 5:30 p.m., I'd made a decision that would have seemed paranoid just hours earlier. I was going to test Marcus. On the drive home to our shared apartment in Riverside Commons, I crafted my trap. It had to be believable, detailed enough to be convincing, but completely false so I could track where the information went. Marcus was already home when I walked in, standing in our galley kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, stirring something that smelled like his famous carbonara. He looked so normal, so genuinely happy to see me, that for a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind. "There's my superstar," he said, crossing over to kiss my cheek. "Rough day? You sounded stressed in your text." I set my purse down carefully, buying myself time. "Yeah, about Hartley Industries. It's actually kind of a mess." His face shifted into concerned boyfriend mode so smoothly I almost missed the flash of something else, anticipation, in his eyes. "What happened?" "I thought the presentation went perfectly." "It did, but now there's drama with their competitor, Meridian Corporation. Apparently Hartley is considering a joint venture instead of going with an outside agency." I watched his face as I delivered the lie. Jennifer Walsh called me around 4 p.m. They want to meet Thursday morning to discuss a completely different approach, something about incorporating Meridian's existing brand guidelines into a unified campaign. Marcus nodded sympathetically, but I caught him glancing toward his phone on the counter. "That sounds complicated. What kind of timeline are they thinking?" "Super rushed. They want the new proposal by Monday, and the budget's been cut to $150,000 because of the partnership." Another lie, but I made sure to sound frustrated about it. "The whole thing is turning into a nightmare. I'm sorry, babe. That really sucks." He turned back to the stove, but his movements seemed more hurried now. "What time Thursday morning?" 10:30. At their downtown office instead of the usual conference room. I pulled a beer from the fridge, proud of how casual I sounded. Honestly, I'm wondering if it's even worth pursuing anymore. This Meridian partnership thing could fall through and leave us with nothing. "Don't give up yet," Marcus said, not looking at me. "You never know how these things will play out." After dinner, Marcus excused himself to answer a few work emails and disappeared into our bedroom with his laptop. Through the thin walls, I could hear the muffled sound of a phone call that lasted nearly 20 minutes. I sat on our couch, staring at the TV without seeing it, feeling sick to my stomach. The man I'd been planning a future with was in the next room, probably feeding my fake information to his colleagues at Brennan Creative. Information designed to make them waste time and resources chasing a meeting and opportunity that didn't exist. When Marcus emerged an hour later, he seemed lighter somehow, more relaxed. "Sorry about that, work's been crazy lately. You know how it is." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know exactly how it is." He settled next to me on the couch and pulled me close, and I had to fight every instinct not to pull away. Instead, I let him hold me while I planned my next move. By Thursday at 10:30 a.m., I'd know for certain whether the man I loved had been systematically destroying my career. The wait was going to kill me. Wednesday morning arrived with a text from Marcus that made my blood run cold. * emergency client meeting moved up to today. Wish me luck. Might be working late tonight. *. I stared at the message over my untouched coffee, hands shaking slightly. My fictional Thursday meeting had somehow become his very real Wednesday emergency. The confirmation I'd been dreading was right there in 12 casual words. At work, I moved through my morning routine like a robot, responding to emails and attending meetings while my mind raced. By 10:15 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I told my assistant I was taking an early lunch and drove downtown to Hartley Industries building. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I parked across the street with a clear view of the main entrance and waited. At 10:47 a.m., a familiar figure emerged from a black Audi that definitely wasn't Marcus's beat-up Honda Civic. Marcus stepped out wearing his best charcoal suit, the one I'd helped him pick out for his cousin's wedding last spring. He wasn't alone. 2 other men in expensive suits followed him toward the building, and I recognized one immediately, David Brennan Jr., the founder's son and current VP of Business Development at Brennan Creative. I'd seen his photo in industry magazines enough times to know that confident stride and perfectly styled hair. They looked like they owned the place as they walked through those glass doors, briefcases in hand, ready to present their innovative solutions to a client meeting that existed only because of information stolen from my pillow talk. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching the building and feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single bad decision. Marcus had orchestrated this entire betrayal with the precision of someone who'd done it before. The fake concern, the strategic questions, the way he'd immediately mobilized his team based on my lies, it was all too smooth, too practiced. My phone rang, startling me back to reality. It was Rebecca Chan, my project coordinator. Sarah, where are you? Jennifer Walsh from Hartley just called looking for you. She sounded confused about some meeting that was supposed to happen this morning. Of course. Jennifer had probably received a call from Brennan Creative trying to confirm details about a meeting she'd never scheduled, for a partnership that didn't exist. I'll call her back in 10 minutes, I managed. Just tell her there was some confusion about scheduling. When I finally worked up the courage to call Jennifer back, her confusion was obvious. Sarah, I'm not sure what happened, but we had someone from Brennan Creative show up this morning insisting we had a meeting about some Meridian partnership. I've never heard of any such partnership, and frankly, I was disappointed they seemed to know confidential details about our discussions with you. My throat felt tight. I'm so sorry for the confusion, Jennifer. I have no idea how that happened. Well, I certainly do. Her voice had turned cold. Someone's been sharing information they shouldn't have. We take confidentiality very seriously at Hartley Industries, Sarah. I think we need to pause our current discussions until we can figure out how our private conversations became public knowledge. The line went dead. I sat in my car outside the building where my boyfriend had just torpedoed my career using information I'd given him myself, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The Sarah who'd walked into that break room yesterday would have driven home crying, would have confronted Marcus with tears and accusations, would have demanded explanations and apologies. But that Sarah was gone. The woman sitting in this car was someone harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Marcus had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know it yet. I started my engine and drove back to work, my mind already calculating exactly how much damage he'd just done to himself. The game had changed, and now I was playing to win. When I walked back into Morrison and Associates that afternoon, I felt like I was seeing everything through a different lens. The office that had felt like home for 2 years suddenly seemed fragile, temporary. I'd just watched my 3-year relationship and a major client contract die simultaneously in the span of an hour. But as I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, a memory surfaced that made my stomach churn even harder. 3 months ago, I'd been up for a promotion to senior account manager. I'd made it to the final round against 2 other candidates, including Jamie Peterson from our digital team. The night before my final interview, Marcus had been unusually attentive, asking about my presentation strategy and what questions I expected. I'm worried they'll ask about the TechFlow campaign, I told him while we shared takeout Chinese food. It went over budget by 15%, and even though the client was thrilled with the results, I know management wasn't happy about the cost overruns. Marcus had nodded sympathetically. Have you thought about how you'll spend that? Maybe focus on the long-term value instead of the short-term costs? I'd lost that promotion. The feedback from my boss, Patricia Morrison, had been crushing. Sarah, we were impressed with your presentation, but some concerns were raised about your project management capabilities, particularly regarding budget oversight. We decided to go with someone who's demonstrated stronger financial discipline. Jamie Peterson got the job. And 2 weeks later, I'd overheard him talking to Patricia about his innovative cost control strategies that sounded remarkably similar to ideas I'd sketched out in my notebook, ideas I'd shown Marcus when I was preparing for my interview. Now, sitting at my desk with this new clarity, I opened my laptop and started digging. I pulled up every project proposal I'd worked on in the past 18 months, cross-referencing them with Brennan Creative's client announcements and press releases. The pattern was worse than I'd imagined. The Richardson Group account, lost after someone anonymously tipped them off about a potential conflict of interest with one of our smaller clients. Brennan Creative signed them 6 weeks later. The Suntech presentation derailed when the client received an advance copy of our proposal with several key details altered to make our timeline seem unrealistic. I'd spent weeks wondering how that corrupted version had reached them. The Emerald Hotel's pitch, sabotaged when someone called their marketing director to suggest that my previous experience was primarily with much smaller, regional properties. Brennan Creative's hospitality division landed that contract with a campaign that used 3 ideas I brainstormed during late-night conversations with Marcus. By 4 p.m., I'd identified 8 separate occasions where my career had been systematically undermined, and Marcus had been the only person with access to the specific information used against me each time. My phone buzzed with a text. * meeting went longer than expected. Don't wait up for dinner, grabbing drinks with the team to celebrate some good news. Love you, red heart *. Celebrating. He was celebrating destroying my career. I screenshotted the message and saved it to a new folder I created on my phone, Evidence. Then I did something that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. I started planning my revenge with the same methodical precision Marcus had used to sabotage me. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. I stayed at the office until nearly 9 p.m., using my access to Morrison & Associates client database to cross-reference every lost opportunity with public records of Brennan Creative's new business wins. The scope of it was breathtaking. Over 18 months, Marcus had cost our agency an estimated $1.2 million in lost revenue while helping his own company secure at least 7 major contracts. He hadn't just been stealing my ideas or sabotaging my presentations. He'd been conducting corporate espionage using our relationship as cover, and I'd been his unwitting accomplice the entire time. As I finally packed up my things to leave, Patricia Morrison stopped by my desk. "Sarah, I heard about the Hartley situation. I know this is difficult, but these things happen sometimes." "Actually, Patricia," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, "I think I know exactly why it happened. Can we schedule some time tomorrow morning? I have some information you're going to want to see." Her eyebrows raised. "Of course. 8:30? Perfect." I drove home through downtown traffic, passing the Hartley Industries building where Marcus had celebrated his latest victory just hours earlier. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I was smiling. Marcus thought he'd been playing chess while I played checkers. Tomorrow, he was going to discover he'd been wrong about which game we were playing all along. The confrontation with Patricia Morrison the next morning went better than I could have hoped. I'd arrived at 7:45 a.m. with a flash drive containing every piece of evidence I'd compiled, spreadsheets tracking the correlation between my lost accounts and Brennan Creative's wins, screenshots of Marcus's suspiciously timed social media posts, and a detailed timeline of information shared versus opportunities lost. Patricia's face had grown progressively darker as she clicked through my documentation. By the time I finished explaining the Hartley trap and its results, she was gripping her coffee mug so tightly I thought the handle might snap. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. How long has this been going on?" "At least 18 months that I can prove. Possibly longer." I'd kept my voice professional, clinical. "The total estimated loss to our agency is $1.2 million in contracted revenue, not counting the downstream effects on our reputation." She'd been quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen. "What do you want to do about this?" "Honestly? I want to destroy him. But professionally speaking, I think we should document everything and let our legal team handle it. There might be grounds for corporate espionage charges." Patricia had nodded grimly. "I'll have Janet from legal review this today. In the meantime, Sarah, I owe you an apology. That promotion you didn't get 3 months ago? If this information about budget concerns being fed to us is accurate, then we made that decision based on deliberately falsified intelligence." The validation felt better than I'd expected, but it also crystallized something I'd been avoiding all morning. Morrison and Associates would survive the scandal, probably even come out stronger after the legal dust settled. But I couldn't stay here anymore. Every project, every client meeting, every strategy session would remind me of how thoroughly I'd been played. It was time for a bigger move. That evening, I sat on our couch pretending to watch Netflix while Marcus told me about his amazing day at work. He was practically glowing as he described landing a huge new client that would probably mean a promotion within the next few months. "That's wonderful," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "What kind of company is it?" "Hospitality industry. Can't say much because of confidentiality agreements, but let's just say it's going to be a game changer for the agency." He kissed my temple, and I had to fight not to recoil. "Things are really looking up for us, babe." "Us?" As if we were a team, when really I'd been his unwitting informant for over a year. "Marcus," I said carefully, "I've been thinking about my career lately. About making some changes." He muted the TV and turned to face me, concern flickering across his features. "What kind of changes?" "You're not thinking about leaving Morrison, are you? You've worked so hard to build your reputation there." The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it. "Actually, I am considering other options. There's a headhunter who's been reaching out about some regional positions. Better money, more responsibility." This wasn't entirely a lie. Elena Vasquez from Premier Marketing Solutions had contacted me 6 months ago about a senior director role, but I declined because it would have meant relocating to Portland and leaving Marcus behind. Now, the idea of putting 400 miles between myself and this situation felt like exactly what I needed. "Regional positions where?" Marcus asked, and there was something sharp in his voice now. "Could be anywhere. Portland, Seattle, Denver. The headhunter represents clients across the Western region." I watched his face carefully. "I know it would complicate things for us, but career-wise, it might be the right move." "Sarah, that's a huge decision. Maybe we should talk through the pros and cons before you do anything drastic." His hand found mine, thumb stroking across my knuckles in what used to be a comforting gesture. "Besides, things might turn around for you at Morrison. That Hartley thing was just bad luck." "Bad luck?" I wanted to laugh, or scream. Instead, I squeezed his hand and smiled. "You're probably right. I'm just feeling frustrated, you know?" "Of course. But don't make any major decisions while you're upset. Promise me?" "I promise," I lied smoothly. The next morning, while Marcus was in the shower, I called Elena Vasquez. The call with Elena Vasquez changed everything. "Sarah Chen. I was hoping you'd call me back eventually." Her voice was warm, professional, with just a hint of triumph. I have to say, the timing couldn't be better. I just had a regional director position open up at Pinnacle Marketing Group that has your name written all over it. I was sitting in my car in the Morrison and Associates parking lot, having arrived 20 minutes early to make this call in private. "Tell me about it." "Regional Director of Strategic Accounts, Pacific Northwest Division. They're expanding aggressively and need someone to oversee a team of 12 across Portland, Seattle, and Boise. The salary range is $145,000 to $165,000, plus performance bonuses that could add another 30%. Elena's excitement was infectious. But here's the really interesting part, they're specifically targeting mid-level talent from agencies like Brennan Creative and Morrison and Associates. Apparently there's been some industry buzz about poaching talent from the Portland market. My heart started racing. When would they need someone to start? Yesterday, if possible. They want to conduct interviews next week, with an ideal start date of 3 weeks from now. I know it's fast, but Sarah, this is exactly the kind of opportunity that could set you up for VP level within 2 years. Through my windshield, I could see Marcus's Honda pulling into the parking garage across the street, Brennan Creative's building. He'd left the apartment 15 minutes after me, claiming he had an early strategy meeting. Watching him walk through those glass doors, briefcase in hand, knowing what I now knew about how he'd been using me, made my decision crystal clear. Elena, I'm interested. Very interested. What do they need from me? Updated portfolio, 3 references, and honestly? A compelling story about why you're ready to make the jump to regional leadership. Can you pull that together by Monday? Absolutely. I was already mentally cataloging which projects to highlight, which colleagues would give me strong references. One question, do they have any existing relationships with Brennan Creative? Elena paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. Actually, yes. Brennan Creative is one of their primary competitors in the Portland market. Why do you ask? Just doing my homework on the competitive landscape. The lie came easily now. It's always good to understand the market dynamics before jumping in. Smart thinking. That's exactly the kind of strategic mindset they're looking for. Elena's approval was obvious. I'll email you the full job description and application materials within the hour. Sarah, I have a really good feeling about this match. After hanging up, I sat in my car watching the steady stream of Brennan Creative employees filing into their building for another day of stealing other people's work and calling it innovation. Somewhere in that building, Marcus was probably already planning his next move, identifying which of tonight's pillow talk conversations might yield useful intelligence. But this time, I was 3 steps ahead of him. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found David Kim, a former Morrison colleague who'd moved to a boutique agency in Seattle 6 months ago. David had always been brutally honest, and more importantly, he had connections throughout the Pacific Northwest marketing community. David, it's Sarah Chen. I hope you don't mind me calling out of the blue, but I could use some insider perspective on the Portland market. Sarah. Of course, what's going on? I'm considering a move to Pinnacle Marketing Group. Regional director position. What do you know about them? David whistled low. Pinnacle? They're serious players. Aggressive growth strategy, excellent client retention, and they pay well above market rate to get the talent they want. He paused. They've been making waves lately by systematically targeting Brennan Creative's client base. Word is they're building a team specifically designed to outmaneuver Brennan's tactics. What kind of tactics? The kind that walk the line between competitive intelligence and corporate espionage. Brennan's been getting a little too comfortable with their information gathering methods, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what he meant. David, hypothetically speaking, if someone had inside knowledge of Brennan Creative's methods, detailed knowledge of how they gather competitive intelligence, would that be valuable to a company like Pinnacle? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Sarah, David finally said, his voice carefully neutral, that would be extraordinarily valuable. The kind of valuable that turns good job candidates into irreplaceable strategic assets. Good to know, I said, watching Marcus disappear into the Brennan Creative lobby. I'll be in touch. The interview process with Pinnacle Marketing Group moved faster than anything I'd experienced in my career. By Friday afternoon, I was sitting in Elena's downtown office, reviewing the formal offer that had just come through. $158,000 base salary, plus a $15,000 signing bonus and relocation assistance up to $8,000, Elena read from the contract. They want you to start Monday, October 14th, that's exactly 3 weeks from today. Sarah, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never seen a company move this aggressively for a candidate. The offer letter felt substantial in my hands, real in a way that made my current situation at Morrison and Associates suddenly feel like a prison sentence I'd been serving without realizing it. But there was something else, a detail Elena had mentioned during my phone interview with Pinnacle's CEO that made this opportunity feel almost too perfect. Elena, when we talked to Richard Pinnacle on Wednesday, he mentioned something about competitive intelligence initiatives. Can you elaborate on that? She leaned back in her chair, choosing her words carefully. Pinnacle has been developing what they call defensive strategies against companies that use questionable methods to win business. They're particularly interested in Brennan Creative's operations. Her eyes met mine directly. When I mentioned your background and recent experiences during the preliminary screening, Richard was very interested in scheduling a follow-up conversation with you about industry practices you might have observed. My stomach tightened. What kind of follow-up conversation? Nothing formal, nothing that would compromise your professional ethics. But if you've witnessed or become aware of corporate espionage activities, Pinnacle's legal team would like to understand those patterns. Apparently, they're building a case about industry-wide problems with information security. I thought about the flash drive sitting in my desk drawer at Morrison & Associates, filled with 18 months of documented evidence showing exactly how Brennan Creative had been operating. About Marcus's systematic betrayal of every confidence I'd shared with him. About the $1.2 million in lost revenue that represented just the tip of what was probably a much larger iceberg. Would this conversation happen before or after I started? Richard suggested sometime during your first week, once you've settled in. Completely optional, of course, but... Elena's smile was predatory. Let's just say that employees who help Pinnacle understand their competitive landscape tend to find themselves on very fast promotion tracks. That evening, I cooked Marcus's favorite dinner, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, and opened a bottle of the Pinot Noir we'd been saving for special occasions. He walked into our apartment at 6:47 p.m., loosening his tie with the satisfied expression of someone who'd had another successful day at professional sabotage. Wow, this looks amazing, he said, kissing my cheek. What's the occasion? I wanted to celebrate some good news, I said, plating the salmon with steady hands. I've been thinking about what you said regarding not making major decisions while I'm upset, and you were absolutely right. Marcus's shoulders relaxed visibly. I'm glad you're feeling better about work. The Hartley thing really wasn't your fault, you know. Actually, I think I figured out what happened with Hartley. I poured wine into both glasses, keeping my voice conversational. It turns out someone from Brennan Creative contacted them with false information about our proposal. Patricia thinks we might have a corporate espionage situation. I watched Marcus's face carefully as I delivered this information. The wine glass paused halfway to his lips, and something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, maybe concern. Corporate espionage? That sounds serious. It is. Morrison's legal team is getting involved, and they're talking about filing charges. Apparently, whoever did this left a pretty clear trail. I took a sip of wine, savoring both the taste and the way color was slowly draining from Marcus's face. The interesting thing is, it looks like this has been going on for months. Maybe even over a year. Really? His voice sounded slightly hoarse. What kind of trail? Phone records, mostly. Email metadata. Digital forensics can track almost anything these days. None of this was true. Morrison's legal team hadn't progressed nearly that far, but Marcus didn't know that. Patricia said they should have preliminary results by early next week. Marcus set down his wine glass and reached for his water instead. Babe, maybe we should talk about something else. Work stress isn't good for either of us. But I wasn't finished yet. Oh, I almost forgot the best part, I said, cutting into my salmon with deliberate precision. I got a job offer today. Regional director position in Portland. I'm going to take it. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear our upstairs neighbor's television through the thin walls. You're what? I'm taking the job, Marcus. It's time for me to make a fresh start. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Marcus's fork clattered against his plate as he set it down too quickly, salmon falling apart on the ceramic. Sarah, that's huge. When did this happen? You didn't mention any interviews. His voice carried that same eager undertone I'd learned to recognize, the fishing expedition disguised as concern. Even now, even as I was telling him I was leaving, he was already calculating what information he could extract. It moved really fast. The headhunter I mentioned called Monday, I interviewed Tuesday and Wednesday, got the offer this afternoon. I kept eating, letting each word land with deliberate casualness. Pinnacle Marketing Group. They're expanding their Pacific Northwest operations. Marcus went completely still. I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he processed that name. Pinnacle Marketing Group, Brennan Creative's biggest competitor in Portland, the company that had been systematically dismantling his agency's market share for the past 6 months. Pinnacle? He cleared his throat, reaching for his wine after all. Isn't that the company that's been aggressively competing with Brennan Creative? Yes. I smiled, savoring this moment more than the perfectly cooked salmon. In fact, that's part of why they wanted me so badly. They're very interested in understanding how their competitors operate. The color that had been returning to Marcus's face drained away again. What do you mean? Well, apparently there's been some industry concern about corporate espionage tactics. Companies stealing proposals, feeding false information to clients, that sort of thing. I met his eyes directly across our small dining table. Pinnacle's legal team is building comprehensive files on these practices. They were fascinated when I mentioned the kinds of sabotage I've been experiencing at Morrison. Marcus's hand tightened around his wine glass. You told them about your work problems? I told them everything, Marcus. Every lost client, every sabotaged presentation, every piece of confidential information that somehow found its way to competitors. I leaned forward slightly. They called it a textbook pattern of industrial espionage. Said they'd never seen such a clear case. Sarah, you need to be careful about making accusations you can't prove. The words came out sharper than he'd intended, and I saw him realize his mistake immediately. Concerned boyfriends don't snap at their partners for reporting crimes to authorities. Concerned boyfriends don't sound defensive when hearing about corporate espionage investigations. Oh, I can prove it. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder, setting it on the table between us like a poker player revealing a royal flush. 18 months of documentation. Cross-reference timelines, contract values, even some interesting correlation patterns between our dinner conversations and Brennan Creative's new business announcements. Marcus stared at the folder like it was a bomb. What's in there? Everything. I flipped open the cover, revealing the first page, a spreadsheet titled Information Shared versus Opportunities Lost. His name appeared in the column marked Confidential Source 17 times. Pinnacle was so impressed with my research that they're offering me an additional $10,000 consulting fee to share it with their legal team. You can't do that. The words exploded out of him before he could stop them. Sarah, you can't just, that's my career you're talking about destroying. Finally, the mask was slipping. Your career? I closed the folder slowly, never breaking eye contact. Marcus, I think we need to have a very different conversation than the one you've been expecting. His face had gone gray now, and I could see sweat beading at his hairline despite the cool evening air coming through our open windows. I don't know what you think you've figured out, but I know exactly what I've figured out. I stood up, leaving my half-finished dinner on the table. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds before Marcus crumbled completely. Sarah, please. His voice cracked on my name. Let me explain. Explain what, exactly? I remained standing, looking down at him across our small dining table that suddenly felt like a chasm. Explain how you've been systematically destroying my career for over a year? Or explain how you celebrated landing the Hartley account by taking your team out for drinks? His face went white. How did you saw me there? I saw you walk into that building Wednesday morning with David Brennan Jr. and whoever else you brought to your fake emergency meeting. I picked up the manila folder, holding it like a weapon. The meeting that only existed because I fed you false information Tuesday night. Marcus dropped his head into his hands. Fuck. Sarah, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Marcus? When exactly were you planning to stop using me as your personal corporate spy? Never. The word burst out of him with startling honesty. God, that sounds horrible when I say it out loud, but Sarah, you have to understand, I was drowning at Brennan. My numbers were shit, David Jr. was breathing down my neck, and then I met you and suddenly I had access to Morrison's entire client strategy. I finished his sentence when he trailed off. Jesus Christ, Marcus. How long were you planning this? Did you target me specifically, or was it just lucky coincidence that you met someone stupid enough to trust you? It wasn't like that. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. When we met at Kevin's party, I had no idea you worked for Morrison. The first few months were completely real, Sarah. I fell in love with you before I ever knew you could help my career. But once you figured it out, you decided to exploit it. I was desperate. His voice was pleading now, hands reaching toward me across the table. You don't understand the pressure at Brennan. It's not enough to meet your targets, you have to crush them or you're out. And you were so open about your work, so excited to share your ideas with me. It started small, just casual information that helped me understand the competitive landscape. When? The question came out harder than I'd intended. When did it start, Marcus? I want the exact moment you decided to betray me. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the folder in my hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The Richardson Group. Last February. He looked up at me with something that might have been shame. You'd been working on that proposal for weeks, and you were so stressed about the budget requirements. You showed me your cost breakdown one night, just venting about how impossible their timeline was. And you called David Brennan the next morning. I didn't call anyone. I just mentioned it during our Monday strategy meeting. Said I'd heard through industry contacts that Morrison was struggling with the Richardson timeline. David asked me to find out more. So you came home and pumped me for additional details. Yes. The admission hung in the air between us. And when Morrison lost Richardson, and Brennan landed them 2 weeks later. Sarah, the commission on that contract paid for this apartment. It covered your half of the security deposit and first month's rent. I felt sick. We'd celebrated moving in together, toasting our future with champagne that had been purchased with money stolen from my own career. How much, Marcus? How much money have you made destroying my professional reputation? I don't know exactly. Bullshit. How much? His shoulders sagged. Maybe $180,000 in commissions over the past year. Plus the promotion to senior account manager last month, which came with a $15,000 salary bump. Nearly $200,000. He'd made almost $200,000 by systematically sabotaging every major opportunity I'd worked on, while I scraped together rent payments and watched my colleagues get promoted over me. Sarah, I know how this looks, but I love you. Everything between us is real, except for this one thing. This one thing? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Marcus, this isn't one thing. This is the foundation our entire relationship has been built on. Every conversation about my work, every time you comforted me after losing a client, every future plan we made, all of it was contaminated by this. But we can fix this. I'll quit Brennan, I'll find something else, You'll what? Give me back 18 months of lost opportunities? Restore my reputation with clients who think I'm incompetent? Undo the promotion I lost because you fed my boss false information about my project management skills? Marcus flinched at each item like I was physically hitting him. The Pinnacle offer is real, isn't it? He asked quietly. Very real. And in 3 weeks, I'll be living in Portland and working for your biggest competitor. I tucked the folder under my arm. The only question now is whether I share this documentation with their legal team or keep it to myself. What do you want from me? I looked at him, really looked, and tried to find any trace of the man I thought I was building a future with. But all I could see was a stranger who'd been wearing my boyfriend's face while methodically destroying my career. I want you gone, Marcus. Tonight. The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 seconds. Marcus stood frozen by his chair, processing what I'd just said, while I remained perfectly still with the folder tucked under my arm like evidence in a criminal trial. Gone? His voice cracked slightly. Sarah, this is my apartment too. My name's on the lease, my stuff is here. Your stuff can be packed and moved out by Sunday. I'm sure David Brennan Jr. can help you find temporary housing, considering how much money you've made him this year. You can't just kick me out of my own home. Watch me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my recent calls. I can have Patricia Morrison and Morrison's legal team here within an hour. We can discuss your illegal activities in front of witnesses if you'd prefer a more formal approach. Marcus's face went ashen. You wouldn't actually press charges. Sarah, please. I know I fucked up, but criminal prosecution? That would destroy my entire career. Like you destroyed mine? I kept my voice level, almost conversational. Marcus, in the past 18 months, you've cost Morrison and Associates over $1 million in lost revenue while enriching yourself and your company through corporate espionage. The only reason I'm giving you the option to leave quietly is because I don't want to spend the next 2 years of my life testifying in court proceedings. He sank back into his chair, head in his hands. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. And now there are consequences. I checked the time on my phone. It's 7:23 p.m. on a Friday night. You have until Sunday at 6 p.m. to pack your essentials and find somewhere else to stay. We can arrange a time next week for you to get your furniture when I'm not here. Where am I supposed to go on such short notice? That's not my problem anymore. Marcus looked up at me with something between desperation and calculation. What about Pinnacle's legal team? Are you really going to share that documentation? Here was the moment I'd been building toward all week, the decision that would determine whether I was someone who took the high road or someone who played the game by his rules. I thought about all those lost opportunities, all those nights I'd blamed myself for failures that were actually sabotage, all those conversations where he'd comforted me while secretly planning his next move. That depends entirely on what you do next, I said finally. What do you mean? I mean that Pinnacle is very interested in understanding Brennan Creative's methods, but they're also a professional organization that values discretion. If you disappear quietly from my life and find a new job somewhere that doesn't compete directly with my new employer, I might decide that sharing detailed evidence serves no useful purpose. Marcus straightened slightly, hope flickering in his eyes. You'd keep the documentation private? I'd consider it. But Marcus, if I discover that you badmouthed me to anyone in the industry, or if you try to sabotage my transition to Pinnacle, or if you even breathe my name in a professional context. I let the threat hang unfinished. I understand. Do you? Because let me be very clear about what happens if you cross me again. I'll provide Pinnacle with every piece of evidence I've gathered, along with a detailed timeline of your activities. Their legal team will share it with Morrison's lawyers, and both companies will file formal complaints with the Better Business Bureau and whatever professional licensing boards govern marketing ethics. Your career in this industry will be over. Marcus nodded quickly. It won't come to that. I'll be gone by Sunday. I'll find something outside the Pacific Northwest market. I won't contact you or anyone you work with. Good. I moved toward the hallway, then paused. One more thing, Marcus. That $180,000 in commissions you made? I'd suggest saving as much of it as possible. You're going to need a substantial emergency fund while you rebuild your reputation in whatever new market you choose. Sarah, wait. His voice stopped me at the threshold. For what it's worth, I really did love you. That part was never fake. I turned back to look at him one final time, this man who'd shared my bed and my dreams while systematically undermining everything I'd worked for. Maybe you did, Marcus. But you loved your career advancement more. I walked into our bedroom and closed the door, leaving him alone at the dining table with his cold salmon and the wreckage of two careers, mine, which he tried to destroy, and his own, which he just discovered had been destroyed in return. Through the thin door, I could hear him making phone calls, his voice hushed and urgent as he began the process of explaining to friends why he needed emergency housing. I pulled out my laptop and began drafting my resignation letter to Morrison and Associates, effective in 2 weeks. By Monday morning, I'd be free of both Marcus and the crime scene our relationship had become. The real question was what I'd do with that freedom once I had it. I spent that weekend in a strange state of limbo, packing up 3 years of shared memories while Marcus systematically erased himself from our apartment. He moved through the space like a ghost, filling boxes with his belongings while carefully avoiding eye contact. By Saturday evening, most traces of his existence had been loaded into a rented U-Haul truck. I'll be back Wednesday for the furniture, he said quietly, standing in our now half-empty living room with his keys in hand. I'll be at work. Leave your apartment key on the kitchen counter when you're done. He nodded and left without another word, and for the first time in years, I was truly alone. Sunday morning brought an unexpected phone call from Patricia Morrison. Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you on the weekend, but we've had an interesting development. Her voice carried a tension I'd rarely heard before. Brennan Creative CEO called me personally yesterday. Apparently, they're conducting an internal investigation into potential misconduct by one of their senior account managers. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. What kind of misconduct? Corporate espionage. Unauthorized sharing of competitive intelligence. They specifically mentioned concerns about information regarding our client strategies reaching their team through unofficial channels. Patricia paused meaningfully. Sarah, they asked if we'd be willing to cooperate with their investigation. I set down my coffee carefully, mind racing. Marcus had clearly panicked after our confrontation and done something spectacularly stupid, probably tried to get ahead of the situation by confessing to his superiors, hoping they'd help him manage the fallout. What did you tell them? I told them we'd consider it, pending our own legal review. But Sarah, this changes things significantly. If Brennan is conducting their own investigation, it means they're taking this seriously enough to potentially terminate the employee involved. Do they know it's Marcus specifically? They didn't mention names, but given our previous conversations about your situation, I think we can assume they've identified their source. Patricia's voice turned sharp with satisfaction. Honestly, I'm impressed. Most companies try to cover up this kind of internal misconduct. The fact that Brennan is proactively investigating suggests they're genuinely concerned about legal liability. After hanging up, I realized Marcus had made a critical error in judgment. By confessing to Brennan's leadership, he transformed this from a private relationship crisis into a corporate scandal that would now have its own momentum regardless of what I decided to do with my evidence. My phone rang again 20 minutes later, Elena Vasquez. Sarah, I have some fascinating news about your new employer. Richard Pinnacle just called me personally, which almost never happens. Elena's excitement was palpable. Apparently, word has reached him about some kind of industry investigation involving Brennan Creative and corporate espionage. He wanted to confirm that you're still planning to start October 14th. Of course I am. Why would that change? Well, it seems that Pinnacle has been building a case about Brennan's business practices for months, and if there's now an internal investigation happening, it could accelerate their timeline significantly. Elena lowered her voice conspiratorially. Richard hinted that if you have any relevant information about these practices, sharing it could result in additional compensation beyond what we've already negotiated. I walked to my window, looking down at the parking space where Marcus's Honda used to sit. What kind of additional compensation? He mentioned a special consultant rate of $500 per hour for competitive intelligence briefings. Sarah, if you have detailed documentation about Brennan's methods, this could easily add $20,000 to your first year's earnings. $20,000. Nearly 10% of my new base salary, just for sharing information about practices that had already cost me far more than that in lost opportunities and damaged reputation. Elena, can you set up a confidential call with Richard for tomorrow morning? I think we have quite a bit to discuss. After she hung up, I sat in my half-empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and the lingering smell of Marcus's cologne, and realized that his betrayal had accidentally positioned me for the most advantageous career move of my life. Sometimes the best revenge was simply allowing your enemies to destroy themselves while you prospered from the chaos they created. Marcus had wanted to play corporate espionage games. Now he was about to learn that I was much better at them than he'd ever imagined. The call with Richard Pinnacle on Monday morning exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. His voice carried the confidence of someone who'd built a multi-million-dollar agency by staying 3 moves ahead of his competitors. Sarah, Elena mentioned you might have insights into some questionable industry practices. I have to say, the timing is remarkable. We've been documenting Brennan Creative's methods for 8 months now, but we've never had access to someone with your unique perspective. I was sitting in my car outside Morrison and Associates, having arrived early to make this call in private. What exactly have you been documenting? Systematic client poaching through illegally obtained proposal details, coordinated misinformation campaigns designed to discredit competitors, and what appears to be an organized network for gathering corporate intelligence. Richard's tone turned sharp with professional anger. The problem is proving it. These operations are sophisticated enough that finding concrete evidence has been nearly impossible. Until now, I said quietly. Exactly. Elena mentioned you have documentation spanning 18 months. Detailed spreadsheets, timeline correlations, even some recorded conversations I saved when I started getting suspicious. This last part was a slight exaggeration. I had a few voicemails Marcus had left about urgent client questions, but nothing explicitly incriminating. Still, Richard didn't need to know that yet. Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you. Pinnacle isn't just competing with Brennan Creative, we're actively working to expose their illegal practices. If your documentation is as comprehensive as it sounds, you wouldn't just be joining our team as regional director. You'd be joining as our secret weapon. The phrase secret weapon sent an unexpected thrill through me. After months of feeling like a victim, the idea of becoming someone's strategic advantage was intoxicating. What would that look like practically? Beyond your regular director duties, you'd serve as our primary consultant on Brennan's operational patterns. We'd want you to review their client pitches for signs of illegally obtained information, help us identify which prospects might have been contaminated by their intelligence gathering, and provide expert testimony if the situation escalates to legal proceedings. And compensation for this additional role? We'd structure it as a separate consulting contract. $750 per hour for analysis work, $1,500 per hour for any legal testimony, plus a $50,000 completion bonus if our efforts result in formal charges being filed. Richard paused to let those numbers sink in. Sarah, if this plays out the way I expect, you could easily earn an additional $80,000 to $100,000 in your first year beyond your director salary. I gripped my phone tighter, doing quick mental math. My base salary at Pinnacle would be $158,000, plus a $15,000 signing bonus. With consulting fees, I was looking at potentially $250,000 in my first year, nearly double what I'd been making at Morrison. There's one more thing, Richard continued. We've been approached by 3 other agencies in the region who suspect they've been targeted by similar tactics. If we can definitively prove Brennan's methods, we're looking at coordinating a multi-company legal action. The consulting fees for something that scope could reach $200,000 annually. My mouth went dry. We weren't talking about revenge anymore, we were talking about completely restructuring the Pacific Northwest marketing industry, with me as the primary architect. Richard, I'm very interested. When do you need my documentation? Could you overnight it to our legal team? I'd like our attorneys to review everything before you officially start next Monday. After hanging up, I sat in my car watching Marcus's former colleagues file into the Brennan Creative building across the street. In 2 hours, I'd be submitting my resignation to Morrison and Associates. By this time next week, I'd be working for Brennan's biggest competitor with access to information that could destroy them entirely. Marcus had created a monster, and he had no idea she was about to devour everything he'd worked for. The transition to Pinnacle Marketing Group happened faster than I'd imagined possible. By Thursday of my first week, I was sitting in Richard's corner office overlooking downtown Portland, spreading 18 months of documentation across his mahogany conference table like evidence in a war crimes tribunal. Jesus Christ, Sarah. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, scanning the spreadsheets I'd prepared. This is more comprehensive than anything our investigators compiled. Look at this, you've got exact dates, contract values, even transcripts of conversations where he pumped you for information. David Chen, Pinnacle's head of legal, was photographing each page with methodical precision. This establishes clear intent and systematic execution. Sarah, some of these incidents occurred across state lines, which could make this a federal case. I watched them process the full scope of Marcus's betrayal, feeling a strange mix of vindication and unease. What had started as personal revenge was rapidly escalating beyond anything I'd anticipated. There's something else, I said, pulling out my phone. I've been tracking Brennan Creative's social media and press releases since I started here. They're hemorrhaging clients. Richard looked up sharply. What kind of losses? For major accounts in the past week. Hartley Industries issued a statement about concerns regarding information security practices. Emerald Hotels terminated their contract citing breach of confidentiality protocols. And this morning, Richardson Group announced they're conducting a formal review of their agency relationship. David whistled low. Word's getting out. Once clients start questioning whether their proprietary information is secure, it creates a cascade effect. It gets better, I continued, scrolling through my saved screenshots. Marcus posted on LinkedIn yesterday. He's officially pursuing new opportunities outside the Pacific Northwest. Apparently, Brennan Creative accepted his resignation Monday morning. Resigned or terminated? Richard asked. The official line is resignation, but I have it on good authority from my former colleagues that he was escorted out by security. Brennan's conducting a full audit of every client file he touched in the past 2 years. Richard stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the city skyline with the expression of a general surveying a conquered battlefield. Sarah, I need to ask you something directly. How far are you willing to take this? What do you mean? We have 3 other agencies ready to join a coordinated legal action. The FBI's White-Collar Crime Division has expressed preliminary interest based on the interstate commerce implications. And the Better Business Bureau is launching a formal investigation into Brennan's business practices. He turned back to face me. This could become the biggest corporate espionage case in the region's history. The weight of that statement settled over me like a heavy blanket. When I'd confronted Marcus in our apartment 2 weeks ago, I'd been thinking about personal justice and career recovery. I hadn't considered that his actions might be part of a larger pattern affecting the entire industry. Richard, there's something you need to know. I didn't discover most of this through careful investigation. I found out because Marcus was my boyfriend. We lived together for 3 years. Every piece of intelligence he gathered came from conversations in our apartment. David and Richard exchanged glances. Sarah, David said carefully, that actually strengthens our case significantly. It proves the information was obtained through personal relationships rather than legitimate competitive research. The FBI will be very interested in that dynamic. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk Sarah, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Asterisk. I showed the message to Richard, whose jaw tightened. When did Marcus get your new number? He doesn't have it. This must be from a burner phone. Another message appeared. Asterisk, I know what you're doing with Pinnacle. Meet me tonight or I start making calls about your role in all of this. Asterisk. The implication hit me like ice water. Marcus was threatening to expose my cooperation with Pinnacle's investigation, potentially positioning me as a conspirator rather than a victim. Gentlemen, I said, screenshotting both messages, I think our timeline just accelerated. Richard's face went stone cold as he read Marcus's messages. David, we need to move on this immediately. If he's threatening Sarah, it means he knows we're building a case. How could he possibly know? I asked, but even as the words left my mouth, I realized the answer. The industry's too small. Someone at Brennan must have heard I joined Pinnacle and put two and two together. David was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling Detective Morrison at Portland PD's White Collar Division. These messages constitute witness intimidation, possibly extortion. He looked at me seriously. Sarah, you cannot meet with him under any circumstances. This is exactly the kind of mistake that derails federal investigations. My phone buzzed again, *1 hour. Pioneer Courthouse Square. Come alone or I start calling your new colleagues with some very interesting stories about your collaboration, *. He's escalating, Richard observed grimly. Sarah, what could he possibly tell people that would damage your credibility? I thought about it, my stomach churning. He could claim I was a willing participant. That I deliberately fed him information as part of some scheme to eventually join Pinnacle and bring inside knowledge with me. The more I considered it, the more I realized how plausible that narrative could sound to someone who didn't know the full story. That's exactly why we need law enforcement involved now, David said, ending his call. Detective Morrison is sending a team to Courthouse Square. We're going to set up surveillance and let Marcus make his threats on record. You want me to wear a wire? The idea made my voice crack slightly. Nothing that sophisticated. Just keep your phone on record and try to get him to explicitly state what he's threatening to do. If he admits to the original corporate espionage or threatens to make false statements about your involvement, we'll have everything we need. Richard leaned forward. Sarah, I know this isn't what you signed up for when you took this job. If you want to step back and let law enforcement handle it from here. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended. Marcus destroyed my career for 18 months, and now he's threatening to destroy my future too. I'm not backing down. 45 minutes later, I was walking through Pioneer Courthouse Square with my phone recording in my jacket pocket and Detective Morrison's team positioned at strategic points around the plaza. The October evening air was crisp, and the square was busy with commuters heading home from work, perfect cover for the surveillance operation. I spotted Marcus near the fountain, wearing a black jacket I'd never seen before and looking haggard in a way that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. When he saw me approaching, his expression shifted between relief and something that looked almost like desperation. Thank you for coming, he said as I got within earshot. Sarah, this situation is spiraling out of control, and we both know it. The only thing spiraling is your career, Marcus. What exactly do you want? He glanced around nervously, as if sensing the surveillance team even though they were invisible to me. I want you to back off. Whatever you're doing with Pinnacle, whatever information you've shared with them, it needs to stop. Or what? Or I tell them the truth about how eager you were to share Morrison's client details with me. How you used to practice your presentations in front of me and ask for feedback on competitive strategies. His voice carried a desperate edge. Sarah, I have emails you sent me with client contact information. Text messages where you complained about Morrison's pricing strategies and suggested ways Brennan could undercut them. My blood ran cold. Those emails and texts existed, casual conversations between partners that could easily be reframed as corporate espionage if taken out of context. You're talking about destroying both our careers now, I said quietly. My career is already destroyed. But yours doesn't have to be. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Call off Pinnacle's investigation. Tell them you realized the evidence was inconclusive. I'll disappear to another market, and we both move on. And if I refuse? His smile was cold and calculating, an expression I'd never seen on his face during our 3 years together. Then tomorrow morning, Richard Pinnacle receives a very detailed email about his new regional director's history of corporate collaboration. The recording device in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my jacket as Marcus delivered his ultimatum. Around us, commuters hurried past the fountain, oblivious to the fact that they were witnessing the final moves of an 18-month corporate espionage case. Marcus, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart, you're threatening to fabricate evidence against me. You do realize Detective Morrison's team is recording this entire conversation? His face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone, showing him the active recording app. Everything you just said about destroying my career with false allegations? That's witness intimidation and conspiracy to commit fraud. Federal crimes. Marcus spun around frantically, scanning the square, finally spotting the undercover officer's position near the MAX station. Sarah, you don't understand what you've done. I understand perfectly. I stepped back as Detective Morrison emerged from behind a food cart, badge visible. I understand that you've been committing corporate espionage for over a year, costing my former employer $1.2 million in lost revenue. I understand that when you got caught, you tried to destroy my reputation to save yourself. And I understand that 30 seconds ago, you threatened to file false police reports if I didn't help you cover up your crimes. Marcus Sullivan? Detective Morrison approached with two other officers. You're under arrest for corporate espionage, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. As they cuffed him, Marcus looked at me with something between hatred and disbelief. This won't end the way you think it will, Sarah. There are always consequences. The only consequences, I interrupted, will be yours. 6 months later, I was sitting in Richard Pinnacle's office reviewing the final settlement agreements. Brennan Creative had paid $2.4 million in damages to 4 different agencies, including Morrison and Associates. Marcus had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and banned from working in marketing or advertising for 5 years. 3 other Brennan employees had been terminated for participating in the intelligence gathering network. The FBI called this morning, Richard said, sliding a check across his desk. Your final consulting payment for the federal case. $127,000. I stared at the number, still hardly believing it. Combined with my regional director salary and the other consulting fees, I'd earned $312,000 in my first year at Pinnacle, nearly triple what I'd been making at Morrison while Marcus was sabotaging my career. There's one more thing, Richard continued. David Brennan Sr. called yesterday. Brennan Creative is shutting down their Pacific Northwest operations entirely. They're selling their client list to us for $800,000. I leaned back in my chair, processing this final piece of news. Including Richardson Group? And Hartley Industries? Every single account that Marcus helped them steal from you and other agencies. Sarah, you're not just getting your career back, you're inheriting the entire competitive landscape that was taken from you. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made me smile. Regional Director Promotion, congratulations. Elena Vasquez had forwarded me a job posting that had appeared on LinkedIn that morning. Marcus was looking for work again, having served his sentence. The position he was applying for was Assistant Marketing Coordinator at a small nonprofit in Cleveland, Ohio. The salary range was $34,000 to $38,000 annually. I deleted the email without reading the details. Some games end with winners and losers. Others end with winners and people who learned that the game was always bigger than they realized. Marcus had thought he was playing corporate espionage, but he'd actually been playing with federal crimes and organized conspiracy charges. I had thought I was playing for personal revenge, but I'd actually been playing for industry transformation and generational wealth. The best part about winning wasn't just that Marcus lost everything he'd stolen from me. The best part was that he'd never even realized I'd been playing a completely different game until the moment Detective Morrison put him in handcuffs. 2 years later, when I was promoted to Vice President of Strategic Development with a $240,000 salary, I didn't think about Marcus at all. That was the most satisfying victory of all.